Before I dive into that, I want to, try and be as scientific as possible. We do share opinions here in the podcast, and that's okay, but I want to make sure that I state my bias. Obviously, I'm being very visual. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm wearing a SpaceX shirt, and I am a big fan of SpaceX. If the literal track record of this podcast is clear, we're big fans, and we should do our best to try and be critical as well and not be some, diehard and not having any critiques. But, there is that aspect. But ultimately, I'm an aerospace engineer who joined it at the heyday of, the pinnacle, the height and the very end of the space shuttle program. So I grew up with it as it was, doing all of its amazing work at the later space shuttle STS missions. Probably, what was that, like STS-50 towards the end of the last mission in 2011. And I went to school thinking I would work on the space shuttle, and then that didn't happen. So there is a little bit of angst on my end. I am more attuned to how does this pay for itself? How does whatever program we do for the next human operation not make it so that we have to restart completely over like we did with the space shuttle? And it's taken a decade to return from that, and a lot of really hard work. Big congratulations to astronaut Doug Hurley, who was on that last mission. He's just retiring, and he's done an amazing work. But it's people like that who stayed in this that are really important. And I want to make sure that I focus on the human aspect of stuff, and not sometimes the engineering challenge. You can get a little cold, and just like in everything in life, you start looking at people as not human beings, but a place to make fun of or whatever, and all that. So I'm trying to keep an open mind, but definitely I'm very much invested in Elon Musk and what he's doing, and literally in some cases, I do own Tesla stock. To be completely honest, I also own a little bit of stock in Virgin Galactic's holding. So just to be completely upfront, those are the places that I've definitely done that and talk about my biases. But ultimately, I am an aerospace engineer whose focus is the longevity of the space industry, right? So there's a lot that's happening right now. July 20th, again, Jeff Bezos, New Shepard, is going to be flying to the edge of space. And one of the things that's very similar as far as a human experience from this flight is the New Shepard rocket and capsule that's going to be bringing them up to the edge of space, then giving them a ton of viewing space. Is a really, really interesting spacecraft. The rocket, the system itself, has flown a whole bunch of times and landed repeatedly. They've been flying them over and over again. Technically beat SpaceX to the first landing of a rocket by days, maybe even hours. And there's always been these little billionaire jumps and like one-ups throughout this whole thing. Richard Branson is the first actual billionaire to go to space, the edge of space, if you will. And that has definitely come from, a long time. That race did not just begin. They didn't just overnight say, hey, we're going to build this during the pandemic and then launch people into space. Virgin Galactic had been at this for 17 years and Blue Origin for over 20. We had footage we drove by when we went to our NASA social mission for the CRS-19 mission to resupply the International Space Station. We drove by the actual place where they were building the Blue Origin, home base down in Florida, but massive amounts of work being done behind the scenes. And one of the things that I like SpaceX over Blue Origin, as companies now take the place of some of the progress instead of it just being NASA. These other companies, they're trying to carry the torch of what it means to be a company in space and what it means to send human beings into space, which is ultimately this next era that we're discussing here. What are the ways and they do it? One of the things that I love about SpaceX, and I think we all do here, it's one of the reasons we're able to have some content here for this podcast and for space in general, and it's because of NASA, is the open source aspect, right? Public access, allowing people to share the things that are taken in space with taxpayer money and all that stuff, right? That tradition about broadcasting and sharing has definitely been the case for SpaceX. Obviously there's some things they don't share, but they are extremely open. And on the opposite side of that spectrum is Blue Origin. And for a very, very long time, it was very difficult to know what was going on there. Obviously, you would just have to be an actual reporter and investigate and get on the ground and talk to people. But as far as what's available on the internet for everyday people, there really wasn't a lot. Most people didn't even know about Blue Origin until recently with this auction. And it's one of those things where I wish they did more. And they've really started to up this PR online, this content online. It's always felt like it's been behind a curtain, and there are some advantages to that from a developmental aspect. You don't publicly show everything, all the failures on your way to being successful, because NASA made a ton of failures on its way, and so did SpaceX. The first launches until their first successful one for SpaceX were all failures. And if they hadn't made it on that last launch for the Falcon 1 to deliver a payload for the military, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't have gotten to this point where they've now revolutionized and brought America's ability to send humans to the International Space Station back. So my point here is that I wish they were more public. The aspect of how people in Blue Origin as a culture deal with things differently from SpaceX is also something to talk about, right? Literally, the trolls of Blue Origin have loved reminding me over the years that Blue Origin is the tortoise in the tortoise and the hare race of the space race. You know, SpaceX being the hare and going really, really fast, and then not getting there in the end. It has been a really long time, and yes, slow and steady is great if you have the money to cover up all the mistakes and build the development, really, right? Because you're building something from complete scratch. Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin have the money. They can keep that going, and I think having more PR and sharing this message is only going to help them in that aspect. And everything I've seen about this first mission with Wally Funk, now who was slated to be the oldest person to go to space, 82 years old, a pioneer of the Mercury 13 days, and we're gonna talk way more about her history here as I learn more about her. But she's an awesome, amazing person. She's gonna be she's flown pretty much everything that you can fly with a license. The FAA will allow you to take up there. Her experience and what she's going to take away from this is going to be amazing. The Bezos brothers, that will be... what will Jeff Bezos take away going up there and coming back, seeing the world from that perspective? I think we saw the effect on Richard Branson, which was I think fits to what we were discussing in that live episode for the Unity 22 mission, which is this could be a way for, even though the ability to go to space is only really for the billionaires that build their own way to get there, right? And then the people that happen to go on. But the effect, like, what does that do to their perspective of how they bring that back to now their company? What does that change their perspective, like it did with Richard Nixon's administration, where they invented the Environmental Protection Agency after the pictures of Earth coming back from the later moon missions? It did things that were by the standard not normal, right? You wouldn't expect necessarily a Republican president, especially at that time, to want to create an Environmental Protection Agency and put the money there and not somewhere else. What can that do for the guy who created Amazon and has revolutionized a lot of robotics and even like replacing human beings as workers for the most part, and using automation and making things super easy? What does going to the edge of space and looking back do to a person like that? The auction process is a little weird. It's a world I'm not used to. The seat on this mission was supposed to go to the winner of the bid to auction for a seat to go up with the Bezos brothers originally. That went up for $28 million, and the process of having like anonymous people bidding for people you don't know in a room, and just the amount of money, something about that just didn't sit well with me, and I've been dealing with my own issues with that. But the choice to bring Wally Funk out there is amazing, and just to offer that ride to her, she more than deserves it. That has made up that entire auction process for me. And then Oliver Damon, an 18-year-old physicist, physics student, right? He's going to see firsthand and feel with his human computer, all the senses he's going to have. He's going to go up there and feel what that feels like and experience physics and literally a trajectory, right? They're going up to the top of an arc, spending time in zero-G up there, and then coming back. That is the classic physics problem. How does that change this person's career? How does this change Oliver's whole way of looking at this? We've got a link in this week's episode more into the details of why Oliver is there, because Oliver is not the person that spent $28 million on the ticket. Apparently, that person that originally won that first bid, the first place bid, is going to go on a future mission, and that is going to allow Oliver's dad, who is the second place bidder, to then allow to give it to his son to go into space. So a little bit of interesting shuffle, but hey, that just means more money going into Blue Origin's pocket to develop this technology further, which is all American made, which is great. Both SpaceX and Blue Origin are in Texas for a lot of this stuff right now. SpaceX is also in Florida as well, and so is Blue Origin, as we showed that video earlier. This next flight is going to be really, really interesting. It's, again, more controlled. The SpaceX launches, the Falcon 9, it's violent. You're bringing it's a lot of thrust and forces that you're going through, vibrations, pressure changes as you're trying to bring this giant payload into orbit and have enough energy to be falling consistently, and then get to the International Space Station and come back. That's a lot of energy, that's a lot of speed, a lot more chances for things to go wrong. So it's a lot more complex of a system. For both Virgin Galactic, which took a custom plane up, dropped, and then lit the engine to go into its top of the arc, the Blue Origin rocket will be doing the entire arc. But because it's starting from standstill, it's a small rocket, a tiny rocket with comparatively to the Falcon 9, right? The mass, super small. So it only needs the engine that it has on board to go up and come back, and the capsule is going to bring them back pretty softly. A landing burn and parachute, so they will experience very little. It's not going to be violent. Let's put it that way. Like a Falcon 9 launch, it will be pretty soft. Something that will be closer to what commercial space flight will look like when we all get to go up there. We're not going to be going up there on something that's as extreme as a Falcon 9 launch, or a Saturn V launch, or Delta Heavy launch, Delta IV Heavy launch, which would be crazy. Falcon Heavy launch, those will not be as crazy. It will be pretty simple. So that's pretty interesting, right? This is more like what it's going to look like when we all have access. But then the question is, what does open access actually look like for everyday people? Who is actually going to be able to go? Right now, there's the Omaze, I guess, contest to get 2 tickets, a pair of tickets, on the next Virgin Galactic trip to the edge of space. So you can literally apply for free, and then you can pay more into this Omaze fundraiser for this organization that is going to then give free trips up into space for kids who are young and impressionable, who are in STEM and all that stuff. So there is that option, so you don't need the money. But working for a company like this, right, that is trying to send human beings into space, is a really good place to start. There's obviously the astronaut corps. There's, as I've been learning, going and being an analog astronaut and doing missions on Earth that are simulating things like a lunar colony or a Mars colony. The Mars Society is doing that as well. So these are right now the ways to get into this. And then now the ability for people who are very wealthy to spend money that's getting donated to charities, especially in the Blue Origin case. They just gave away $1 million to a bunch of different organizations. Again, another great thing that Blue Origin is doing that I do appreciate. So again, to encapsulate all of this, even though I may have critiques, there's things that each of these companies are doing well, and there's things that each of these companies are not doing so well. So this is kind of the balance. We're discussing this new era where now it's not, SpaceX and NASA butting heads. It's how do these three different billionaire types get to space, and how does that change it for us? Because this is going to be much bigger than these three guys, right? This next era is going to open us up to not only the edge of space, but also orbitally across our solar system.